Nikki? Okay.
I'm hearing some background noise. Nikki, maybe we need to, maybe we need to mute
Somebody's
all.
eating bagels or something. Yeah, mute everyone.
I'm going to mute everybody, and so those of you who are speaking will need to unmute yourselves thereafter.
Maria, are you going to start?
Yep. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and director of the Dispute Resolution Program there. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. This is the 230th monthly breakfast for dispute resolvers. These breakfasts are co-sponsored by the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York and the City University of New York Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College. I started these breakfasts after 9/11, and until April of this year, we met in person at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Since April, we have been meeting virtually, so this is now our 6th virtual breakfast. All of the videos of the virtual breakfasts are now posted on the ACR-GNY website at www.acr-gny.org, and we'll soon be posting them on the CUNY Dispute Resolution Center's website as well. These breakfasts would not be possible each month if we didn't have this wonderful team of co-conveners who join me, including Julie Denny, Chuck Newman, Nikki Borofsky, and Matthew Latimer. The focus of today's breakfast is both timely and incredibly important. And we're so delighted that Diane Rosen will be focusing on how we can apply positive psychology to the dispute resolution field. And to introduce Diane, I'm going to now turn this over to Chuck Newman, one of our co-conveners, as I just mentioned. Chuck? Chuck?
Unmute, Chuck.
Sorry about that. Beg your pardon. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Is my volume okay?
A little louder would be nice.
Let me see what I can do. It's my not only privilege but pleasure to introduce Diane Rosen, today's speaker about applied positive psychology and the connection with dispute resolution. Diane is an author, lawyer, and organizational consultant. She has more degrees from more places in more fields than you could shake a stick at. Some of them were in the announcement of the meeting, so I won't repeat them all. Diane is, and here, Diane, this is what I need a fact check on, a member of the board of the Scheinman Institute of, I guess it's conflict resolution at the Cornell ILR School.
Yes.
Thanks very much. Does a million other things, and most importantly for me, is just a pleasure and an invaluable contributor on all of the committees and boards and other things that she works on. One quick housekeeping thing. We will be reserving some time at the end for conversations, questions, and so forth. In addition, if you have a question during the course of Diane's talk, please put it in the chat, and we, mostly Nikki Borofsky, will be monitoring the chat for those questions. And it may be that some of those questions will wind up being raised during the course of the talk itself. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us. And Diane, lovely to hear from you.
Thank you, Chuck. And I'm really delighted to be here. As Chuck well knows, positive psychology is really a passion of mine. And I've spent the last few years studying it and working with it, and really find the connection to all elements of life, and particularly ADR. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. Sharing. Okay, and let me just switch to slideshow. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, great. So this is our plan for this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about what is positive psychology. I'm focusing on some elements of positive psychology that are particularly relevant to dispute resolution. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what is a conflict, and then I'm going to try, hopefully, to connect the dots. As Chuck said, I really welcome questions. It's a little bit hard to have a dialogue in a Zoom format, but Nikki has full authority to interrupt me if there's a question, and I'm happy to take it in real time and not just wait for the end. But I am hoping to give us plenty of time at the end for questions. This group is usually not even a little bit shy on questions. So with that, so what is positive psychology anyway? Positive psychology showed up through Marty Seligman around 1999 when he became president of the American Psychological Association. And the purpose of it was really to think about what happens beyond remediation and treatment and looking at flourishing. What makes a good life? And so it's the study of well-being and optimal functioning. And there are parts of the field that are not just at the individual level, but at groups, institutions, and even at the societal level. What's well-being? Okay, this is a poll. Nikki, I need your help with the poll because I'm not getting the poll icon. So I'm asking you, what do you think is the key to well-being? This is obviously not anything close to a full list, but these are just some highlights of things that people often connect to when they talk about well-being. And we're just going to take a little poll to see where people land. So it's anonymous, and please vote.
You should all see the poll option popping up on your screen. Please feel free to vote, and we'll leave it open for a little bit while the results trickle in. Thank you.
I don't see the poll.
I don't either. It's not showing up, Nikki.
I'm seeing the running results of the poll, but I don't have the ability to vote.
I don't think the hosts can vote on the poll.
Right.
Only everybody else. And we already have 103 or 104 people participating. It's going to be different on everybody's interface.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see it.
It showed up on mine.
If you want, you can type in your answer into the chat box, and we can kind of retabulate that at the very end.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have any results up yet? I'm not able to see the results. Nikki, are you?
Oh dear.
Oh, here we go.
I'm sharing the results. We can relaunch the polling for a second go, but this is the results that we have so far.
So the reason I ask this question is because people have different ideas about what well-being means. Sometimes people think it's about, kind of who I am. I'm either predisposed or not to find myself in a place of well-being. Some people think it's about the situation of their life. Where am I in time and space? Some people think it's about perseverance and putting in the effort. And interestingly, not so much on this poll, but a lot of people think of well-being source as luck. I'm in the right place at the right time. I know the right people. I have good relationships. I have good health. And so where this comes out is really pretty interesting. A lot of people are showing personality disposition. And so I want to spend some time looking at how positive psychology thinks about well-being and sources. And I'm going to posit that well-being is something that is fully within our control. So in 2005, Sonia Lyubomirsky and her colleagues came up with what they called the happiness formula. And this is really important because they're saying that happiness is really comprised of a bunch of different things. Some of it is your disposition, to wit, the answer on personality and disposition. 10% is your life circumstances, but 40%, and this is the part that we really care about, is within your control. And what does that actually mean? It means that you have choices about how you present yourself, how you see the world, and the efforts that you make toward your own well-being. But the most important thing about positive psychology is it is not about unicorns and rainbows and candy canes. Happiness is a part of well-being, but it is not all that well-being is. So positive psychology takes us back many, many millennia to Aristotle. And Aristotle conceived of the concept of eudaimonia, which is about a life well lived, the good life. And it's about being your best self. And it's not just about hedonic pleasure, but it's about flourishing. And Aristotle focused on some things that we're going to be talking about. Character strengths, capacities that are elevated to virtues, your personal excellences, mediated by reason. And mediated by reason is something that connects to what we're going to talk about as mindset. And this, choice, character, and action. You are presented with circumstances in your life, positive and negative. What do you do with them? How do you interpret them? How do you live? How do you move toward being your best self and creating the life that you want? Living well is an end in itself. It is not simply a goal or a destination. Living well is a way to be. And when I think about positive psychology, I think about it less about what you do and more about who you are. So this takes us to Marty Seligman, and he has developed a model of well-being called the PERMA model. And many of you may, if you're familiar with positive psychology, are probably familiar with this model. And over time, other people have added other letters like health or vitality or energy, all of which are relevant. But mostly what this is about is that it's a balance of positive, negative, multidimensional factors and elements in your life. Positive emotions are exactly what you think they are. Happiness, joy, contentment. These are the hedonic pleasures that we all experience. Engagement in the positive psychology lexicon is about flow, about being so engaged in what you're doing that time is suspended, that you're deeply focused, that you're paying a lot of attention, and that the work becomes an end in itself. People who do organizational work often think about workplace engagement, and it's very similar. It's about being invested in the tasks for their own for the purpose of doing them, and not necessarily for just the end result. Relationships, well, this makes sense. This is about connection to yourself, to others, to the people around you. Meaning and accomplishment. So sometimes people confuse meaning with, save the world, and it's got to be a big overarching purpose. In the positive psychology space, meaning does not have to be gigantic. It doesn't have to be, a lofty goal. It can be about focusing on what matters to you, living with integrity, caring about others. And accomplishment is, again, achievement. So these elements are all interrelated. They're all mutually reinforcing. And in real life, you're not having all of them all the time. But as your life is happening and things around you are happening, these, it's kind of like whack-a-mole, but in a positive way. These things pop up and take on different significance depending on what's going on in your life. So we think about this as subjective well-being, and I like to think about that as a net positive. We all understand that everything isn't perfect all the time. We all can't be happy and thrilled and experience meaning and purpose every minute of every day. However, what we can do is we can look for ways and techniques and tools and interventions to increase the frequency and magnitude of the experiences that support an overall sense of well-being. So positive psychology is not making lemonade out of lemons, and that's it. It's about thinking about, as the world is coming at me, as things are happening, what can I do? Going back to that happiness formula, what are the voluntary actions that I can take to move my life in the direction of well-being? And Marty Seligman likes to talk about 3 different ways to think about it: the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life. And we experience all of these things in different times, and it's a continuum, but it's also a loop. So it's not that we move from one to the other, but we loop through these various things over the course of our lives. So why do we care about this? Well, positive psychology is evidence-based, research-oriented, and the results are in. When a sense of well-being increases all of these positive things. So I think everybody would want to experience a sense of well-being, and these are the different kinds of things that happen. And again, these are all interconnected. As I am feeling and moving toward my own well-being, I experience a sense of self-efficacy that will move me towards setting and realizing my goals. Those goals matter to me. That gives me purpose. I'm motivated because these have intrinsic meaning for me. And in the course of doing that, I get to be creative, I get to act with purpose, and depending on what's at hand, I probably am working with other people or connecting with other people in both establishing, setting, and realizing my goals. So well-being building blocks. I think these are kind of self-evident, and we're going to focus on a few of these today. We're going to focus on strengths, goals, resilience, and mindset, and a little bit and a dollop of making it meaningful and aligning with core values. Self-care and other awareness are core foundations. And I think many of us have become familiar with all these, all the mechanisms for self-care and mindfulness and so forth. And I think what's really interesting about talking about this right now, and within the context of dispute resolution, is we are going through unbelievably challenging times. And people are being tested in so many ways. It's stressful. They may have lost loved ones. They may be caring for sick family members. They may be trying to balance work and family and childcare and homeschooling and a million other things. And all of these things are challenging for us. We're all tired and weary and fatigued, and we wish life was regular again. So how can we use these building blocks of well-being to find ways within this world, at this moment, at this time, to make our lives still thrive, for us to flourish, and for us to find meaning and purpose, writ large or writ small, in how we're living? This is really the core concept of positive psychology. It is a journey. It is not a destination. It is not, hit well-being, one and done, I'm good to go. It is a constant process, because as life continues to come at us, good things, bad things, neutral things, we are going to be looking in each of these moments in our lives. Where are we, and how is it serving me, and how can I move forward in a positive direction that supports my thriving and well-being? So I'm going to focus on these strengths, goals, resilience, and mindset, because they're particularly relevant, I think, to the field of dispute resolution. What are strengths? Strengths, defined in positive psychology, are about your core capabilities and your core elements of what you care about. And so strengths are not what I can do well necessarily, but the qualities that are intrinsic to me: compassion, kindness, judgment, perspective, wisdom, care for others. These are the core values of life, and everybody has their own personal snapshot. But the interesting thing about strengths, and the evidence tells us, that people do what they can and what they like doing. And that tends to match up with what you're good at and what you care about. And so your strengths move you toward what you actually do. Your strengths are who you are, and your actions are what you do. So character strengths, this references back to Aristotle and eudaimonia. These are your pre-existing capacities and authentic ways of being. And when you activate them and use them, you are energized. It enhances your sense of fulfillment and meaning. And because you're energized and they matter to you, it supports performance, your own personal growth and development. And when you are using your strengths, you are at your most authentic, you are most committed, you experience more positive values, and you get positive emotions, and you realize your own values. So when you use them, this is all the good stuff that happens. And this is a cycle, but it isn't. I want you to think about this not so much as a progression, but as a loop of things that happen. So that these things play on each other, they broaden and build. Barbara Fredrickson, who's a positive psychology scholar, has written a lot on positive upward spirals and how things build on each other. So as you use your strengths, you actually create upward spirals for yourself, because your persistence leads you to your goal setting and execution. And it also, this is very important, it gives you tolerance for challenges and low points. This is particularly relevant in dispute resolution, because in the course of conflict, people are challenged, people are struggling, people are arguing, and it is by going back to what matters to them, their values, that supports their resilience, and the goal setting and execution are very relative to finding resolution in conflicts. So I'm just going to give a quick reference to the values and action inventory of strengths. So Marty Seligman, as well as some others, developed this inventory of looking at people's strengths. They did a study of what are considered strengths across cultures, over time, and they landed on 24 basic character strengths that show up throughout history and across cultures, and they developed a survey that measures them. And so when you take this survey, and by the way, it's free, this is the website where you can take it. You can take it for free, or you can pay a little bit of money if you want a bigger report. And it gives you a snapshot of your strengths based on your answers to a survey. And everybody shows up their top signature strengths, which are when they are at their most authentic and are the most invigorating. But the beauty of what we call it the VIA is that everybody has all of the character strengths, but everybody has them in their own ranking. So we all have them, but we have them in different magnitudes and in different order. So for example, my strengths show up in curiosity and perspective, and those are what guide me. That's probably, as Chuck says, why I have more degrees than anybody, because I'm endlessly curious and I like school. So I do encourage you to take the VIA, just because it's an interesting exercise, and it's a very affirming snapshot of where you are, reminds you what you do best, who you are, and how you present yourself in the world. It's a really great thing. It's a fun thing to do, and I encourage you to do it if you're so inclined. So this leads us to goals. Why do goals matter? Well, we all set goals, whether it's sometimes they're explicit, sometimes they're implicit, But the purpose of goals in positive psychology is they bring you to the future. Goals are prospective. They draw you to what you want, and it pulls you to the future. And when you are pursuing your goals, again, all of the PERMA elements are activated. You feel engaged and you experience positive emotions. It provides you with meaning and purpose, and the goal itself has a benchmark of accomplishment. And when you are using your strengths, you realize your goals, and your strengths help you activate and develop your goals. Well, what kind of goals? Realistic goals are the best ones, viable goals and unrealistic goals. This is really, really important in the context of dispute resolution, because all of us who are trained in mediation and other kinds of dispute resolution practices, one of the things we're always thinking about is reality checking people's ideas and potential solutions. Is their goal and intention for the dispute and its resolution, is it viable? Is it unrealistic? When the goals are unrealistic, they're actually demotivating. People are resentful and disengaged. When the goals and the intentionality is viable, then people understand it, they can align, and they can move in that direction. And on a personal level, I think I can speak for myself. When I've set myself unrealistic goals, it's really disheartening. But when I set myself viable goals, then I experience a much more positive sense of myself, and I'm pulled toward things that matter to me. And when you talk about viable goals, that does not mean that they're easy. That just means that I have a pathway that makes sense for me to be able to achieve those goals. And that for example, if I wanted to be an opera singer, that would come in this category because I'm relatively tone deaf and it would be a disaster, and I'm not going to get there and I'm not going to be frustrated. But if I'm interested in music and singing, I can set a goal for myself to sing better. And I can take some lessons and I can practice and I can sing better, and maybe I can participate in a singing group, but I'm not going to be on the stage at the Met.
Diane, we have a question about what the difference is between unrealistic and aspirational goals.
Okay, no, that's really an excellent question. So all goals essentially are aspirational because it's thinking about something that you want to achieve in the future going forward, whether it's tomorrow or next year or in 5 years or in 10 years. So goals are always aspirational to a certain extent. When they become unrealistic, when you do not have the skill set or capability to achieve them. So an unrealistic goal is something that is completely beyond your personal capabilities, and there's not a clear pathway to develop it. So I always think about the kids who like, I want to be a movie star. Okay, are you an actor? No. Do you want to study acting? No, I just want to be a movie star. That's an unrealistic goal. But if you want an aspirational goal is, I want to be a performer, I want to be on stage, I want to be in the movies, that's a goal. And as you develop skills and as you develop competence and as you develop efficacy in that arena, then maybe becoming a movie star becomes a viable goal. So goals are by definition aspirational. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a goal because you would have already achieved it. But you want it to be something that makes sense for you, that you can either have the strengths or skills or capabilities intrinsically, or you have a pathway to develop them, and you have the ability to pursue them realistically. So I am not going to be an astronaut. I am not going to be a ballerina, but I can learn about the science of space. I can learn about ballet. I can take a bar class. So I can make my goal align with my interest, and I can make it viable. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. I think that's great. Appreciate it. Please continue to submit your questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Please, more questions. I like more questions. So resilience. So resilience was something that a lot of people are talking about these days, especially because of remote work and lockdown and challenges around COVID and everything that it has brought with us. So bottom line, it's from survive to thrive. In the frame that I like to use, it's about the ability to bounce back, the ability to learn from adversity, move forward, and reframe. And something that people don't always talk about with respect to resilience, but I do think is very relevant, is it's not only bouncing back from bad things, it's bouncing back from super good things too. Well, what does that mean? So suppose I've had an incredible success. So many of us in this space today are lawyers. So you had a big win. The mediation went unbelievably well. You won a big case. The negotiation really worked out. Everybody's happy, great result. And now there's kind of that letdown. Oh, I have 5 other things, and my next mediation didn't go that well. The parties didn't settle. We had one session, it was a disaster. So how can I calibrate my big success so that I can draw from it, I can learn from it, and I can deploy it going forward without being devastated by the fact that I couldn't replicate it immediately. So I think moving forward and bouncing back are really important. And for those of us in ADR, reframe is kind of so baked into our vocabulary, but we can use it for ourselves. How do we take what happened and reframe it in a way that it can be meaningful to us? And even a devastating setback doesn't mean that it's the end of everything. How can I take what I learned from that setback and use it to help me move forward? Maybe in that setback, I learned about some people who really were wonderful and caring, and now I made a friendship out of that. That could be a positive thing. Or I learned that I had resources I didn't know I had. That helps me bounce back. So what are the resilience competencies? Connection means connection not only with others, but with yourself. This is all circles back to self-awareness and other awareness. What's going on? Am I realizing it? Am I reading the situation? Am I understanding what's happening within me and in connection with other people? Flexibility and mental agility. This is crucial, and this is crucial in all aspects of life. When things happen that are not as you wished or expected or hoped, what am I going to do with it? How am I going to manage it? Can I find another pathway? Can I think about it differently? Growth mindset, we're going to talk about that shortly. An optimistic explanatory style, self-awareness, and can I look to my strengths to pull me through? Optimistic explanatory style is something that's really interesting. So a lot of us think about optimism as, hope and everything's going to work out and, silver lining and the bright spots. But there's another way of thinking about optimism, and that's about how do I explain things. So I often refer to myself as an optimist in pessimist clothing. My nature is to be skeptical. I can move to sarcastic and cynical. I'm a lawyer. My whole world is about finding problems, finding issues, and so forth. But deep down, I believe that things will work out. They may not work out as I expect, but they will work out and I will move forward. So an optimistic explanatory style is a way that we see the world that says, okay, I'm not the victim of everything. Everything isn't my fault. Things happen. I can imagine a different outcome, or I can imagine moving forward. And one of the definitions I like about hope and optimism is about willpower plus way power. Willpower, that's my goal. I'm moving toward a goal, and way power is about the viability of that goal. How am I going to get there? Can I create a pathway? This can be really, really useful in dispute resolution in helping parties imagine a different version of their narrative. So William James, some say he's one of the fathers of modern psychology, and let's make that gender neutral, a very important innovator in psychology thinking. And he was one of the earliest people to talk about the power of your thinking. And this is not just the power of positive thinking or The Secret, although I have to say I kind of do love The Secret. But it's really about, we control what we think. We can control what we do with our thoughts. Lots of things come in. We're bombarded with information 24/7. Things are coming at us full speed, but we have to sort and categorize and prioritize. And we, at both a subconscious and a conscious level, can make some choices about what sticks and what we pay attention to.
Diane, there's a question that I wanted to get your perspective on.
Sure.
And it's coming in, how can you achieve well-being in say, a country like Venezuela, where everybody is in survival mode? You know, you're worried about blackouts and electricity and the basic kind of requirements to live. And I think you can expand that to, you know, living in the pandemic and other really difficult situations.
So let's circle back to that kind of happiness formula, and let's recast it as a well-being formula. Our life circumstances are what they are, right? You know, if you're living in a country that's experiencing, you know, really bad times, that's out of your hands. But what can I do within the confines of my life to find sources of strength and resilience and creativity and connection? So, yep, it's hard. And yes, things are not going well. And there's a lot of tragedy around me. But what can I find in myself or in connection with others that will bring some meaning to my life? So maybe it's as simple as, can I appreciate a beautiful sunset even if I'm really struggling? Can I find strength and connection with friends and family so that we can share our resources and get through it together? So some of you may be familiar with Viktor Frankl's work. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he was in concentration camps. And he wrote an incredible book, which I really encourage everybody to read, about finding meaning and value and purpose even in the depths of despair. It's finding that moment where you share something with somebody else, where you have a moment of laughter, even in a dark and terrible situation. So we know that 40% of that formula is the life circumstances, the hand that we're dealt by the universe. But we still have some choices within us about how we are going to see ourselves and how we're going to connect with others and how we're going to use our strengths to pull us through by ourselves with others. Does that make sense?
I think so. There was another comment about the relationship of how much is related to privilege with our ability to deal with things in those ways.
The answer is, it depends, and we can't discount the fact that privilege is a factor. But privilege is a factor, but it isn't the only factor, and it doesn't have to be the only thing that defines your experience of yourself and your life. So obviously, I'm not in anybody else's shoes or life or head, and I can't comment on their experience of being of lacking privilege. But again, we go back to that formula. What can I find within myself to improve my life, to move it into a positive direction, and find ways that I can thrive and grow and develop, and in fact, challenge and overcome that privilege and connect with other people. So I know that sounds a little bit lofty and not real, and maybe it feels like a platitude, but the fact is the world is as it is, and what we can do as human beings is use our strengths and our capabilities to make it better and to connect with other people, to understand and have compassion for and empathy with their life experience. So we can't make it go away, and that sucks, frankly, but it doesn't mean that we can't explore and do better.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we want to change the focus and we want to be moving in, these gears, what do? We work on our mindset. So the evidence is in, there's so much research that, and going back to William James, what we do, how we think, how we approach will in fact change how we see ourselves and ourselves in the world. So what does that even mean? So some of you may be familiar with the work of Carol Dweck on growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And essentially, a growth mindset is about seeing the possibility, being willing to learn, being willing to tolerate ambiguity as a launch point for growing and learning, to embracing challenges, to knowing that failure is probably going to happen, but being willing to give it a try anyway, to put forth effort, and to be able to both invite, encourage, and accept feedback. So I think this is where we want to be. And going back to that other question, this is aspirational for some of us. And I like to think about growth mindset. It is not all encompassing all the time. So I can have a growth mindset perhaps about some domain of my life and be a little bit more fixed mindset about others. But my goal for myself is to be always moving toward this direction. There are going to be times that we want to avoid failure and we want to be the smartest person in the room and we don't want anything to happen challenging and we really take feedback in a really personal and negative way. But that doesn't have to be set in stone forever and always in all domains. Can we move toward this? Can we look at parts of our lives where we have a growth mindset and say, I was able to have a growth mindset there. How can I spread this to other areas of my life? So for example, some people may feel very confident about their work, that they're competent and they know how to do their work and they feel really good about it and they're willing to take chances, but maybe feel a little bit less confident in personal relationships. Well, how can I use what I experienced in my work life and translate that to other parts of my life? How can I revert back to my strengths and say, wait a minute, I have these strengths. How can I apply them in other areas of my life? Or I did that thing at work and it didn't go well and I did fail, but my life wasn't ruined and over. That's a positive experience that will help me bounce back in other areas. Or I know that there's uncertainty and ambiguity in this situation and I'm able to deal with it. What's helping me deal with that? How can I use that in another part of my life? So cultivating a growth mindset is an act of will. Now, some people are predisposed and kind of come out that way. Some people are more set in this, and it's a combination of both your inherent wiring as well as your life experience, but it's not fixed in stone. You can, through your thinking, and there are lots of tools and interventions. You can move toward a growth mindset, even if you find yourself in a fixed mindset. And by the way, because we're merely human, you will toggle between these two things. Even within a day, you may be working on something and feel really all over it and really positive and really coping and able to do it, and then have a setback and then say, oh my God, I'm a failure, this is a disaster, and then you can pull yourself out of it. So growth mindset is, again, a process. It's a place you want to be always moving toward in as many domains of your life as you can. So what are the foundations of it? We go back to these same things: self-awareness and other awareness. What is going on in me? What am I thinking? What am I doing? How am I acting? Where are my strengths? Where are my not so strong areas? And how is it landing? What's going on? And how are other people reacting to what I'm saying or doing? So it's this loop of what's going on in me. How is it landing? When I get that information, how do I need to adjust? I thought that, that thing I said was hysterically funny. Nobody laughed. I need to go back and check in with myself and say, you know what, that wasn't a funny joke. What can I do better or differently? What about that didn't work for the other person? Did I offend them? Did I insult them? Et cetera, et cetera. So this is a loop, and we are always looking inward, outward, inward, outward. So I just want to spend a moment on meaning, purpose, and values. Again, this does not have to be save the world. It can be a very specific thing. I want to do my work with integrity. I want to treat people with kindness and compassion. Those are perfectly appropriate meanings and purposes and values. It brings prospectivity. So if I'm looking to do things with integrity, I can think forward about, well, I have this thing coming up. How can I do that in accordance with my own personal standards? And when I'm acting with meaning and purpose and intentionality, it enriches my actions, it enriches my relationships, it helps me frame my goals and intentions, and I'm curious and I'm exploring, how can I get there? So I often like to think about meaning, purpose, and values. Very simple question: what matters to me? What matters to me is what motivates me, it's what moves me forward, it's what gives me strength and power for myself. Am I pursuing it? If this really matters to me, am I working toward it or not? If I'm not, how can I course adjust? And we're gonna circle back to this, but this is also quite relevant in dispute resolution. So let's spend a moment on conflict. What is a conflict anyway? So this is a definition from the Scheinman Institute that I think kind of captures the essence of a conflict. People have incompatible goals. There's not enough for everybody to get satisfied. And there's a sense that if I'm in conflict because I can't achieve my goals because you are in the way. So I think that encapsulates it pretty well. And, there are a lot of different ways of thinking about the elements of conflict. I really struggled with how to depict this in a picture, because it's not actually a circle. It's not actually a cycle. It's like things that are balloons kind of floating around. At the heart of it, of a conflict is, well, what happened? How do I feel about it? And does it impact my identity, and how? And by identity, this is any element of your identity. How does it impact does this mean I'm not a good lawyer? Does this mean I'm not a good business person? Does this mean I'm a bad human being? Does this mean somebody is microaggressing or macroaggressing against me? And in the course of that, there's going to be things about feelings and emotions, about actions, and about perceptions. And in any conflict, all of these three bubbles will show up in some way, but the conflict itself will be more oriented toward one of these elements, even though the others will be present as well. I know that seems a little confusing. And if anybody has a better idea about how to depict this in a picture, I am really open to it, because I probably had about 20 different incarnations of this picture to try to capture how many pieces are moving in a conflict. And in the context of dispute resolution, one of the things we're doing when we're neutrals is trying to sort out, okay, is this an emotional situation, or is this what the person believes, or are they really upset about what somebody did? And we're trying to parse that out. We're trying to use our skills and techniques as neutrals to get in there to understand that better. There's often like not agreement about what actually happened, and there's definitely going to be just different feelings about how the parties feel about it or experience it.
Diane, can
So-
you dig in a little bit to that? I think the group would like to hear a little bit about how you apply what you've learned from positive psychology principles, specifically in the context of dispute resolution. One, how you transmit your well-being mindset to
Yep.
people who have a really overwhelming conflict deficit.
Yep.
And also maybe a concrete example of how you've been able to use this perspective.
Yes, bear with me because we're going to get there. Bear with me. Hang on, hang tight, stay tuned. This is sort of just reviewing some basic things about conflicts. Many of us who've taken any kind of mediation type training, we've learned about these power imbalances. People believe they're entitled to something. Interests we are going to talk about. Relationships, is this conflict about how we get along? Is it about how something happened? Or is it about the process of how we decide how we're going to do things? Positions and interests, this should be very familiar to ADR folks. My position is what I want. It's my statement. I want $500,000 because you did bad things to me. The interests are, what do I need? Do I need that money? Do I really want, is this focused on, I want respect, I want an apology, you treated me badly? What's behind what I asked for? And this is the heart of all dispute resolution. And this is going to be, understanding this is very important, and how we can bring our positive psychology skills into focus. Just stay with me for a minute. Talk about negotiations. In any conflict, people are negotiating a resolution. I happen to like this definition, that it's a communication with results and objectives. So it's a process, it's moving parts. Through the process of negotiation, we're collecting information, we're organizing it and sorting it, we're making decisions and adjusting as we go along, and we're also managing ourselves. Okay, how am I gonna respond to that? How am I gonna parry? How am I gonna thrust? So, is it a conflict, a negotiation? Is it a difficult conversation? I say they're all kind of in the same bucket. It's a conflict because the parties are not in alignment. It's a negotiation because they're trying to get a result. And it's a difficult conversation if it's tough to talk about. So we do a lot of training on difficult conversations and so forth. It's difficult if somebody's having a problem with it, if they don't feel comfortable, if they feel there's a power issue, if they have a right. It's a difficult conversation. And all of these three elements are in play in any dispute. So it's all in a name, and it doesn't matter what you call it, because a conflict and a negotiation and a difficult conversation are all part and parcel of parties are not in alignment. But conflict isn't always bad. It shows you what needs to be addressed. It shows you where the misalignment is. And through resolving a conflict, you can make better decisions. You may improve a relationship if you resolve it. You're learning something, and there's hope for positive change. And it's part of life. It ain't going away. difficult conversations, negotiations, conflict resolution, they are just conversations. And maintaining your perspective and equanimity, particularly if you're a neutral, is going to be how you move the process forward. However, parties don't, this is where we get into trouble. Parties don't see things the same way. And part of the, Chuck is laughing. We had a long talk about this the other day. So why? What's going on, and what can we as dispute resolution professionals know that might help move this in a different direction? So many of you have seen the ladder of inference, and it's a very useful frame of reference. Things happen, we filter it. What does it mean to me? I've made some assumptions and conclusions and beliefs, and then I take action, which leads to another loop. And so within that loop, we're reflecting and we're acting. But the same set of situations don't land the same way. As we all know, both people, the conflict is about a particular event. And as I said, they're fighting about what happened. Well, everybody went up their own ladder and came out in a different place. So knowing that is really important. How can we as dispute resolution professionals help deconstruct that ladder and help parties find, wait, this meant something different to you than the other party. You made this assumption. Was that assumption accurate or valid? You drew this conclusion. Is that conclusion accurate or valid? And so forth. And this, the Johari learning window, which I think is just kind of a beautiful thing, and it applies not only in conflict resolution, but really in every conversation. And it's really, you know, some people use it for game theory and opening moves and stuff like that. But it's just, for me, it's a way of categorizing. We both know the same things. I know something you don't know. You know something I don't know, or actually neither of us know. And in the dispute resolution process, figuring out where the parties are on this grid can help you move toward helping them find their way to a resolution. So I know this, but you didn't know this. Now that you know this, does it change it? So forth. These are the typical obstacles to resolution. We're all familiar with them. Bias, blame, emotions, jumping to conclusions, prejudging, power imbalances. All of these things get in the way of resolving conflicts. So what's a good outcome? A good outcome is one that's good enough, a net positive, because in any conflict, people are moving their positions around. So, and Chuck and I just had this conversation as well. I'm not a believer in the win-win or the win-lose, because as soon as you put those words into it, you've made it binary. And people don't really experience win-win if they've given something up. They actually don't feel like winners. So I like to frame an outcome as, is this sufficient for you to move on? Can you live with it? Is it satisfactory? Is it more positive than negative? Is it positive enough that you can put this conflict behind you? So it's kind of like subjective well-being, right? It's a mix of positive and negatives. Everything isn't, you know, candy canes and rainbows, and I didn't fully get my way and you didn't fully get your way, but we found a place that we could both live with and we can move on. I can walk away from this dispute and I can move forward with my life. I can walk away from this dispute and I can still talk to you. I can walk away from this dispute and feel like my basic needs and interests were satisfied, even though my position moved. So as dispute resolvers, how can we move people off their position to focus on their interests, which are totally subjective, and get them to think about places where the proposed solutions are more positive than negative, because it's all relative. How do you know it's a good outcome? The party said, okay. They know what has to happen next. It's more prospective than ruminative. It's functional, and it's good enough, whether it's happily, grudgingly, graciously, or with a really bad attitude, they can still live with it and carry on. So let's bring this all back to how does this all connect to positive psychology? Bottom line of this is that taking a positive psychology approach is focusing on flourishing and thriving rather than despair and misery. So if I think about things as a problem, how do I just get through it? I'm moving toward how do I thrive and get to a result I can live with? Instead of downloading and telling, I'm engaging in dialogue and I'm asking. I'm encouraging a growth mindset. I'm trying to help people move off of the fixed mindset of what they believe to be true and accurate. And rather than ruminate, I want to generate. So that's very much in the lane of positive psychology. We want to move toward flourishing as opposed to treatment and remediation. So there's something, and I like to use this as a frame in dispute resolution. So there's something called appreciative inquiry. It is kind of like what it sounds like. It's a strengths-based approach to positive change. And so what does that even mean? So appreciating what is and inquiring what can be. And it's about the future. It's about perspection. It's about goals. It's about resilience. And it's about all those elements that we talked about in positive psychology. So how can I develop viable goals to pull this party toward a resolution that they can implement, they can live with, and is satisfactory? This methodology is something that grows out of organizational behavior. It's used to, organizationally, to bring positive change to organizations. And there is an actual method to it. And I encourage everybody who finds this even remotely interesting to go to the Appreciative Inquiry website. The professors that developed this are Case Western University Business School, the Weatherhead School, and there's a lot of methodology, and there's a lot of materials, and there's a lot of reading you can do if you're interested. But the bottom line is you're moving from a deficit-based problem solving to a strengths-based, what can we do? What can happen here? So yeah, you're going to identify the problem because you can't help it. You gotta understand what the issues are. But are you going to spend your time going backwards in time about what caused it and the action plan and still putting the problem at the heart of it? Or are you going to focus on where can we go? What went well in this relationship? Where is your common ground? Imagine what it would look like if you resolved. How could you resolve it? And how can you create that? So oftentimes, in dispute resolution, I work as a mediator, not an arbitrator, but I'm very focused on imagine what might be and designing what should be. And I use open-ended questions to bring the parties to think about that. So I often say, let's do a thought experiment. Suppose XYZ happened. Could you live with it? What would that look like to you? Or imagine that you have solved this problem. Describe it to me. Explain it to me. How would you convince the other side? How could you think about this in a way that the other side could imagine moving in that direction? And how can you create it? So it's a very generative, forward-looking way to resolve conflicts. And again, this is very much based on using open-ended questions, which all of us have learned to do, to be objective and to move the parties from ruminating and venting to imagining their way to a solution. So, okay, that's kind of interesting. Well, what am I supposed to do? As I'm sitting there in the room with these angry parties, what exactly would I be doing? Well, part of what you're doing is acknowledging what goes well. That may be in a joint session, it may be in caucus. Okay, you've made some ground. You've both agreed this. You found what, you know, you both agree that this happened or this didn't happen or this amount of money was involved. Or we made progress and we're at least speaking to each other. That may be what's going well. Can you be flexible and ready to course adjust? As a neutral, can you be listening to what's going on? Can you be paying attention, reading the room, being other aware, and saying, this approach isn't working. What can I do? How can I tap into these parties' strengths? How can I activate their resilience instead of ruminating? You also have to have your personal coping strategies, you know, so that you can maintain your own equanimity and perspective in the room. Also recognizing that your contribution, your words, your attitudes, your sensibilities, your presentation are going to affect the outcomes. Can you optimize dialogue? You don't want to be downloading. You want to be getting the parties to tell you what matters to them. And most importantly, you want the parties to be telling each other what matters to them respectively. And you got to keep asking questions because you don't know what you don't know, because we all make assumptions. So lead with curiosity. And again, this ties back to all of the elements of PERMA. You're addressing the emotions in the room. You're asking questions. You're finding what's going on. You're activating your own creativity. You are being objective as you can, all things considered, because we all can't be completely objective. You're looking, you're exploring, what are the interests behind these positions? What matters to these people? What gives meaning and purpose to the outcome here for them? How can we uncover that and allow the parties to imagine a future where this dispute is behind them instead of ahead of them? How can I, as a neutral, facilitate communication? How can I help the parties set realistic goals? Even in the beginning, in your opening statement as a mediator, you're doing some goal setting for them. You're aligning their expectations with what might happen here. You're telling them how you're going to do what you're going to do. You're telling them what your expectations are for them for their participation.
I have a question. Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
As a mediator, in your opening statement,
Uh-huh.
how do you kind of frame things to get your disputants to think about what might be and what should be?
Right. So it's mostly about, in that opening statement, being very clear about the process, being very clear that you're facilitating their conversation to help them find solutions that matter and make sense to them. So you're tapping into making meaning, you're tapping into viable goals, you're tapping into letting them know that they're going to have an opportunity to tell their story, and you're hinting at prospectivity. You're telling them that you're neutral, and you're telling them that you're there not to judge or prescribe, but to help them hear each other and facilitate their conversation, not solve their problem. So when I'm giving opening statements and in joint sessions or even in caucus, I work a lot at not using the word problem and focusing on, okay, so that's true, where do you want to go? Constantly pointing them toward, where do you want to go? Where do you want to end up? And yes, that's your position, but suppose that you can't have that. Suppose that's not going to work. Suppose the other side's not going to agree. What else might you consider? So it's using that appreciative inquiry, open-ended question technique to ask them to imagine a net positive outcome for them. And by the way, that definitely doesn't happen in the first 10 minutes. That it could be 5 sessions later, but always maintaining your integrity, your equanimity, taking your time, understanding that you really have no idea what's going on for these people. You're going to use questions to find out. And in using those questions, you're not only finding out for yourself, but they're finding out for themselves. Because sometimes when you ask the question and people have to say what they mean out loud, it's the first time they kind of hear themselves, especially if you're not asking them a yes or no question. Do you think you deserve this? Yes, I do. It's very different than why do you think, right? So these are, you're using all your tools, and the connection to positive psychology is remembering goals, strengths, resilience, and mindset. You are often faced with people in a very fixed mindset about the conflict. But tapping into, well, it's also a negotiation. It's also a really difficult conversation. How can I help them draw out what matters to them? How can I help them use their own strengths to formulate their own solutions? How can I remind them of their own resilience? How can we talk about goals, which is really kind of another word for possible solutions, in a way that helps them reality check the viability of that and the operationality of that? So,
Superb, superb. Thank you so much. Very thorough.
okay.
Diane,
So
can you address?
that's the end of my presentation. And because I have a little personal thing, I'm obsessed with Winston Churchill, and I always end everything with a Winston Churchill quote. And this one kind of, I think, is really relevant in positive psychology. We, sometimes we succeed. A lot of things don't go well, but going well doesn't mean that we're not moving in a positive direction. It doesn't mean that we're not using our strengths, our resilience to get to a net positive place and finding connection within that. And the enthusiasm is, well, there's some positive emotions in there. And so there's a lot of sources. I'll make these available, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I really want to thank everybody because, what this presentation told me is there's a great appetite out there, particularly these days, to find ways to move in a positive direction. We are not having fun right now. It is not a fun time. Some people are just merely uncomfortable. Others are experiencing truly tragic things and really stressful, horrible situations. But if there's any way we can find nuggets in any moment of this time to move ourselves and the people around us in a positive direction, that is a good thing. So I really want to thank everybody for listening and for joining today. And questions, please.
But before we kind of allow a more organic and engaged question, I just wanted to relate a couple of the questions that we didn't get a chance to address during the presentation. And one was from Jill Pilgrim, who asked if you have any tips or suggestions for using your techniques when the parties are receptive, but the attorneys are being obstructionist.
Yeah, welcome to our lives. Yeah, and I think again, for me, the way to do that is to appeal to the attorneys through their professional skills. To kind of, I'm looking for a mediator word here, to give them appropriate praise, to thank them for their participation, and to enlist their aid in moving the party, their client, in a direction that might lead to resolution. And if there's really gigantic resistance, then some definite exploration with open-ended questions to the attorneys about their resistance.
Thank you. Another similar, I think, question came out about how do we get over when we find that our own internal wiring ourselves is blocking us from being able to use the tools to achieve a healthy sense of well-being. How do you get out of your own way?
Okay, so this is, you know, remember that slide with the self-awareness and other awareness? Let's go deep into the self-awareness. What's going on for me? Am I exhausted? And, you know, am I sick of these parties? I'm sick of this mediation. I'm cranky. I'm tired. I have a headache. I'm hungry. What do I need to care for myself in the moment? Do I need to take a break? Do I need to stop the action? Do I need a moment to reset my own mindset and do some appreciative inquiry with myself? How can I imagine this going better? What can I do for myself to do that? What can I set as a goal for myself? That may be a little teeny tiny goal, which might mean, how can I stop feeling like I want to roll my eyes every 20 seconds? What can I do? Oh, I can focus on something in the distance. You know, whatever it takes to do a personal reset. But the most important part of it is you have to check in with yourself. What is going on for me that is happening, that is making this situation really challenging for me? And what can I do for myself? And by the way, asking for help if you need it.
Great, thank you. There have been some really wonderful questions, and another one of the questions was, when you showed the iceberg, needs were categorized as greater than wants. Can you explain why needs were lower and bigger on the iceberg?
Right. So my position is what I'm showing to the world. My needs are what brought me to the table. Why this didn't resolve itself before we got to a mediation or an arbitration or something else. The needs are my personal, it's a snapshot of my personal needs for myself. I need to be respected. I need to be attended to. I need to be compensated for my work. I was not treated with dignity. All of those things factor into what I'm asking for is the relief in my case. So yeah, obviously some things are, you know, my medical expenses were X, I want X, but most people add something for their misery and their suffering and their unhappiness. So in the mediation, what you're trying to get at is, so why are you really here? Yes, I know you want the money, and I know this thing happened, and I know the contract was breached, but what happened that prevented it from settling before we got here today? So that's what you're probing. What's behind this for you? And it's an iceberg because that's the part people don't show. People are focused on their positions, they're arguing their positions, but what they're settling, when they settle, it's because the solution met their needs. This is enough money for me to move on. I need that apology. I need whatever. And so we don't often show other people our vulnerabilities and what really matters to us. We focus on the dollars or, you know, fix the porch that you ruined, something like that.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Liesl Baker to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Do this. Thanks, Diane. It's so great to see you, and really wonderful job. Diane and I know each other for a while.
Yes, we do.
One of the challenges of this work is, as you've talked with us about, is that there's only a limited mental span of control that you can have over a particular idea. So the idea that you just explained so well about interests versus positions is a key idea that helps navigate a dispute. If you were to sort of look back over your presentation, but more often than that's your experience, and you were to say there's a particular idea that's not part of the general dispute resolution mindset that you're bringing because of your positive psychology education and experience. You've talked about a cluster of ideas. Would it be looking forward? Would it be bringing out the best selves of the parties? Is there something the equivalent of interests versus positions that can be kind of a little bit of a guiding star for someone in these contexts?
So I would say that the experience that I brought to dispute resolution is that I really don't know what's going on for anybody else. And that earlier in my career, I was definitely much cockier that I knew the answer and I knew what was right. And in studying positive psychology and really focusing on the subjectivity of people's experience of their own well-being, it really brought home to me that a resolution is subjective and I don't know. It is not up to me. And what I can do is I can use the skill set from tools like appreciative inquiry to not only learn for myself, but to help the parties learn for themselves. Because I just don't know. And I think studying subjective well-being has made me much more humble in understanding that I don't know what motivates somebody else. And if I'm going to be effective in helping people resolve their disputes, my real job is to help them surface for themselves what matters and what they want to get out of this process. And where can they land in a way that they are satisfied and can move forward with their lives. That answer it?
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, if I could summarize, is you're trying to bring a learning mindset, not only to your work, but to their conversation. Is that a fair summary?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. A+.
I wanted to synthesize a couple of the other questions that have been coming in, and a lot of them are about really intractable conflicts, people that have opposing political views or just don't see eye to eye. How would you apply the positive psychology tools with the mediation and ADR toolbox to address and move forward in that kind of a situation?
Well, one part of the answer is sometimes you just really can't. If the parties are like this and they're unwilling to hear or learn or listen, game over, let the judge decide or the jury or whatever. But I think the other part of that is always imagining a place where there is some kind of common ground and there is some kind of humanity where people can hear each other. So some of you may be familiar with the work of Jonathan Haidt. He writes, he's a moral psychologist, and he writes about, he had a book on decision making, the righteous mind. He talked about the elephant and the rider. The elephant is kind of like in that iceberg. It's the under the water part, the needs and the less conscious part of what drives you. And the rider is the conscious part that's directing traffic. And so what Jonathan Haidt says is for people to be able to actually connect, the elephants have to talk to each other. You have to talk to somebody's elephant, not their rider. So again, the analogy is you're trying to talk to the position, to the interest rather than the position. And you know what? Sometimes the answer is good try, Ivy League try, and this is just not going to settle. And the other piece of that as a dispute resolution professional is to take that in stride, put it into your own resilience bucket and say, what did I learn from this? What can I take away from this dispute? What signals did I see? Did I miss any signals? Did I miss any opportunities? Or was this a lost cause? And if it was, how can I distill some markers that I can take with me to other cases and say, wait, I'm seeing some red flags. You know, can I deal with these red flags? Do I have any tools? Because again, this is the mental agility of resilience. Am I flexible? Can I course adjust? Can I read the room? Am I paying attention to what's going on with me? Am I disappointed because I couldn't help them solve their problem and so now I'm dejected? Can I get over that? What happened about the way I conducted the mediation? Is there anything that I should remember from that and take to my next case?
Great, thank you so much. I just wanted to answer a few of the administrative questions. Diane, I think you will share your PowerPoint presentation with us.
I will.
So that has a lot of the resources that you've been, alluding to and discussing and citing. So we will be sure to circulate that to all of the registrants, as well as a link to the recording of the session if you want to listen to it again. If anybody has a question they would like to ask viva voce, please feel free to unmute yourself or text, chat me, or raise your hand as Professor Baker did. We are drawing very close to the 10 o'clock time. So Maria, Chuck, Julie.
There is a hand. Felicitas Court would like to speak. Felicitas, why don't you unmute yourself? There you
Thank
go.
you very much. It's a very, very excellent presentation, Diane. And as I mentioned, I'm a clinical psychology, and I wonder, you have so many positive words that you can approach a person. What could you do with someone who has the pattern of thinking is so negative that they want to commit suicide? So I know it's very clinical, my question, but I'm saying maybe just very specific, like sound bites for someone, because it's very high on the rise, suicide, not only in Venezuela, where originally I'm from, where since January, even children are committing suicide. So, and in the world, this is on the rise due to the pandemic also. So I'm mentioning, if you have any specific suggestions, just words that you can address to.
So I would not presume in any way, shape, or form to address something of that magnitude because I'm not a clinician. Yeah. But with anybody who's feeling despair, I think an approach that can be valuable is encouraging them to imagine a future where they're not in despair. So in appreciative inquiry in an organizational setting, one of the questions you might ask the participants in the activity is, you wake up and it's 2025 and everything is amazing. Tell me what it looks like. And then when they tell you what it looks like, then you can reverse engineer. Is any of that doable? Like, what of those things could you do? So again, I would not in any way suggest that that's appropriate for somebody who's suicidal, but for somebody who's just generally negative, kind of, we think of them like the Eeyore, not the Tigger, just think about imagine if it wasn't awful.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Harvey Newman has his hand up.
Yes. Hi, Diana. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was really wonderful. And I've been working, I'm not a mediator, but I've been to many of the breakfasts while I was in New York. Now I'm in West Palm Beach with a wife who I'm taking full-time care of. But up until about a year ago, I would have said, yeah, this is all great and it's wonderful and it seems to work in many situations, but I just kept on feeling like there was something missing, and so I've been pursuing the last year the areas of embodiment in dealing with our nature. And have been involved with a number of things that you may or may not be familiar with, such as HeartMath Institute research on the role of the heart in our dealings in life. Total embodiment meditation, which awakens the senses, and again is an embodiment type of.
There's a lot of somatic studies.
And most recently, the work of Dr. Sue Morter in the energy codes, which I highly recommend everybody to get into, because I think we are at a crossroad now from living from a material world, as Madonna would call it, to a quantum energy world, which has whole other facets of potentiality in mediation and in other forms of human endeavor. And I'm just wondering if you're aware of any of that or have looked into any of that.
I'm aware of some of the work on somatics, and obviously the mind doesn't function if it's not in a body, and the body doesn't function without a mind. So all of those things are useful, but not my area of expertise. Thank you, though, for the question.
Maria,
Anybody else?
We've drawn close to 10 o'clock. Does anybody have any other questions?
You said you have a number of degrees, that education is foremost in your mind. So I'm wondering, for a woman who is as educated as you are, what do you specifically consider your areas of expertise?
Well, I've been a lawyer for a very long time. And at the moment, I'm in a doctoral program in adult learning and leadership. So I'm really kind of finding the intersection in positive psychology and how adults learn and process information.
Thank you.
There have also been many questions about whether you offer courses and where you can be reached for additional information. So we'll be sure to include your contact information as a follow-up.
That would be wonderful. Thank you. Yes. So again, I just want to thank everybody for sticking with me till the end. That's kind of great. I really had a lot of fun this morning. So I hope what we talked about was useful and something you can take with you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It may be that
Very
folks
good.
have to
Excellent.
drop off, but if Diane can stay a few extra minutes, maybe we can have some trailing questions. Thank you so much, Diane. This was just wonderful.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you from all of us. This was absolutely terrific.
Yep. My problem is I never saw the slides. So
Well,
I'm glad.
you'll get a PDF. I'm going to send Nikki a PDF, and she'll
I
share
know
it.
you are, and I'm grateful because I never got off that initial screen.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault.
And when will the video be posted so we can look at it?
We're going to try and get it up next week. It takes a little processing time, but yeah. But I will be sending a link to all the registrants and even individuals who were unable to make it today, so that everybody can benefit from this really wonderful presentation. And then you'll see when you see the PDF that the slides are not only beautiful and instructive, but they're rich with links to additional information. So
yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as Chuck said, we're willing to stay on, keep the call going for a while for those who want to stay on. Otherwise, we have officially concluded the morning breakfast here.
I have a question. It was just raised about you teaching. Do you teach?
Mostly I'm retained by organizations to do programs for them. But like I'm not teaching at a university or anything at this point.
Let's see. My son is a Trump supporter, and everybody knows that. And so we text back and forth. And from this webinar, I text him. I say, like, why are we doing this? Like, we are so clear on. So it really kind of helped me. At least I can ask a question, that it's not political. And so I can ask, like, why are we doing this? And does it make a difference? And what is the goal? So I want to thank you for this presentation. Just having those questions that I can ask, I feel a little bit empowered, that we can move on to understanding.
Look at the Appreciative Inquiry website. Yeah. You'll get a lot of question ideas.
Yeah. So thank you. So that was really helpful.
Vivian, your question related to that in the chat was, what do you do if you can't even agree on the facts?
Well,
any disputes can't.
Yeah. No, but I at this point, I know that I can't agree on the facts. So I'm wondering, like, why are we doing this since we don't agree on the facts? And why are we continuing to communicate by text? And like, does he want to really convince me? Does he, you know, like what is his, I don't understand why he's continuing to talk to me, you know.
Well, you know,
and
you can tell him that your boundaries are that topic's off limits going
no,
forward.
that's the only thing we have to talk about. So I don't want to, I do want to continue talking about it, but I still want to understand why we're doing it. You know, what? Yeah.
You agree not to disagree.
Yeah.
Because you have a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
And
just, but I'm just saying that I never thought of asking him, like, why are we doing this? You know, and so that's a good question. I mean, maybe we can agree on that, why we're doing it. Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else can unmute yourself and jump in?
Positive psychology, in the issue of relationship, positive or negative relationship, when people are blind, how do they see what the nature of their relationship is?
Physically blind or emotionally blind?
No, emotionally, psychologically. When they are blind to the negative aspects of the relationship and they only see the positive.
Well, you know, what Barbara Fredrickson says, and I think it's really very smart, is positive emotions buoy us and negativity keeps us tethered to the ground. And you need both, because if you're too buoyant, you float away into the universe. And if you're too tethered to the ground, you never see the sky. So, you know, everybody's got their psychological makeup, and I would not begin to try and advise how to get somebody to see what they don't see. But if you're in a relationship with somebody, you know, all you want to do is encourage dialogue and ask questions. You know, it's always asking rather than telling always gets people further. People do not like to be downloaded to, they like to be invited to participate.
Right.
Go ahead, Felicitas.
Yes, in regard to that question, my suggestion is that there are questionnaires that let you analyze the thoughts. You know, it's like what kind of thinking you have, and that would help for the dialogue later on, like what they call automatic thoughts. And I can refer you to Beck, cognitive therapy, Beck's approach. And there are plenty. If you go to the website, there are a lot of questionnaires of how to examine thinking. That's my suggestion. Yeah.
Are we good? I think we're.
If there are no more questions or thoughts, do I see a hand raised? No. Yes.
Not afraid of silence, but
I think
that you brought up something when you talked about negative experiences. I'm reminded that they're suggesting that it's hardwired into our brain for negative experiences to be like Velcro and positive experiences to be like Teflon, and that had a very important function in our evolution, because it saved us from dangerous situations to be remembered.
There's a very famous article called "Bad is Stronger Than Good" that actually looks at the prevalence of negative thinking.
Right,
but there's also a desire to move to positivity.
Yeah, we can transcend that with what we've learned today, and you know, we don't have the tigers roaming around generally.
Well, some people still feel like they do.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
You brought up a point just now that's really interesting about evolution, because there's thoughts, as a gentleman just raised, about this is the way it is, or this is a fact, or this is something we've come to know. How do you recognize for yourself what to hold on to and what to let go of?
Always an ongoing inner conversation. And it changes over time. What I believed to be true when I was 30 was really different.
So the only
than what I
constant,
believed to be true.
so the only constant is change.
Right. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Diane, this has been great, and if the amount of chatting that's been going on behind your back is any indication, it's a true volume and testament to the thought-provoking that you've instilled. I had a question that you may have seen, but maybe
Actually wasn't able to see the chat, so I just opened it now, so
the question was simply, how do you create wellness in other people?
well, you can't make anybody do anything. One of the great things we learn as we get older in life is you can't make anybody do a damn thing. What you can do is you can model, encourage, guide, share, listen, but you can't make them, but you can show them pathways, and you can be present for them to help them find pathways that work for themselves.
Thank you.
Once again, Diane, thank you so much for such a wonderful, thought-provoking, stimulating morning here. I think we're all energized to go forward a bit more positively here, not only with ourselves, but in the work that we do. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. So Maria, Chuck, Nikki, could we stay on and just debrief for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop the recording right now.
Thank you.